And now with that out the way, we're going to transition to our other weekly review and talk about the penultimate episode of the HBO original, the DC series, The Penguin. Episode 7 just premiered, entitled Top Hat. And so we're going to get into all the things that went down in this penultimate episode. But before we do that, we'll just give some general big picture thoughts of everything that we saw in the latest episode of The Penguin. So I'll pass it to you, man. What do you think about this brand new edition of the DC show, The Penguin?
Another really solid episode of The Penguin. I enjoyed pretty much everything that went down. I have a very, 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 very small nitpicks with it that I'll get into in the spoiler side of things. But overall, man, still very solid episode. I enjoyed myself. A lot to talk about, a lot to get to, but I really like how this show has conversations about its female characters versus its male characters and what that means for the whole ecosystem, what the show is and how it plays with the rich and the poor, and just all the really cool things about Gotham, I think, seep into what the show is supposed to be. And I think that's really interesting and a very strong point of the show for me and what it does. And again, it's such subtle ways. I think they do it without hitting you over the head with it really well. So yeah, man, I really enjoyed the episode. It was really solid.
Yeah, another great addition to this series. I think all the performances were terrific. Some things that I didn't quite see coming happened. That's always pleasant to see those surprises be thrown into these episodes and to develop the story. And it sets up, I think, everything next week in a pretty satisfying way. Big gripe, big pick, nit that I'm picking, I guess. Again, too convenient. Some very convenient things happen here, specifically with the timing and the deployment of certain storylines at this particular juncture at where we are on the show. I'll get into that into spoilers, but I think that we maybe could have done a better job at maybe spreading some of this information out. I'll just leave it there. But with all of that said, we're going to dive in, talk about all the nitty gritty for this week's episode. So if you've not seen the latest episode of The Penguin, it's your spoiler warning. Go watch it on Max and then come back and finish the rest of our conversation. And so where things pick up this week, we actually go back in time. We go back to a young Oz to see his childhood, to see sort of his backstory in a sense. And we see this relationship that he has with his brothers, Jack and Benny, and how they sort of react and interface with their mother, Frances, who we've seen numerous times, of course, throughout this show. But we can see at an early age that Oz is he's very jealous of the relationship and the love that his brothers get from his mother. And by this point, he already has a medical deficiency. He's already living with this disability within his leg. And so that obviously is something that he's thinking about pretty frequently and pretty actively. But before long, we see that they go out into the streets. They decide to go to this underground railway where they're going to play a game of hide and seek. And so Jack and Benny decide to hide in this latch door of the overflow tunnel underneath the sewers. And in a moment of, I guess, retribution against his own brothers, Oz, a young Oz, decides to lock them in this hatch, lock them behind this overflow tunnel so that they can't get out, and completely leaves them to fend for themselves. And it's also thunderstorming. It's raining massively. And probably a few short hours later, after he returns home to watch a movie with his mother, we see that the fate of those two is that they ultimately drowned within the tunnels of Gotham. And up until this point, we knew that he lost his brothers at a young age. We didn't know exactly what happened, but it was always alluded to the fact that something happened, but we never were led to believe that he was responsible for it, or at least so directly so. But here we see exactly what went down, in that he made a very active choice to not save them and to let them perish because he wanted that adoration and that attention from his mother. He didn't want to share that love. And he becomes, I guess, essentially her number one guy moving forward from here. But what did you think about that whole sequence, everything that they had with this cold open, and again, how it sort of reshapes the character and how we perceive Oz?
Yeah, we were made to believe this one thing, I think, about him, where he had these brothers that he had lost, was one of the few things in his life that went crazy that he didn't have any control over. Like, maybe that was one of the things that led him to a life of crime. Maybe that was one of the things that led him to have to take care of his mom, not necessarily by choice, but by circumstance of what had happened. And to find out that wasn't the case at all is, wow, just so interesting, and to see how it wasn't it wasn't just some like deliberate murder or anything. It was, I'm about to lock y'all in here, and it happens to be raining outside. And y'all, it's gonna flood, and I know y'all in there drowning, but I'm not gonna do anything about it. That's it. I have now chose to sit with what I have done, and it's so I think it's interesting because it definitely does go back to that first episode with Alberto, where he's like, "Dang, I did this thing. I definitely killed Alberto. Now I have to live in it." In a lot of ways, that's exactly what happens here, where he takes things so personal that it goes to the next level of what I would call ridiculous. It's like, what? That's what you got out of that conversation? Like, it's just crazy. I think to see it go down in that way. In a lot of ways, it's sad, but in a lot of other ways, you're like, oh, you were a villain since you were, how old is he in this flashback? You were a villain since you was 10 years old. You know what I'm saying? Like, dang, you've been a villain a very long time. And it's so interesting again, because we see him take care of his mom, and we just expect, again, this is circumstance. Your brothers are here because something happened to them that you couldn't control, but it was you. The TV shows, it was Penguin all along. You know what I'm saying? It's Penguin all along. Like, you did it yourself, man. And so, yeah, I didn't expect it. It does recontextualize the character, and because it's interesting, because we already knew he was a villain. We already knew we didn't, not supposed to technically root for this guy, but now we're supposed to be made to look like, dang, you were never a good person, like, ever. Like, there's never been a time when you were a good person. So yeah, it was a little jarring for me. There is another side of me that's like, do we necessarily need to see that as well? I don't know. Like, we knew he was a villain. We knew he was a bad guy. It was like, look, he's still a bad guy. It's like, dang, he's just a bad guy earlier than what we thought he was. But yeah, that's kind of my thoughts.
Man, this was a lot to take in for certain in the opening moments of an episode. The first thing I'll just quickly say, the young actor Ryder Allen, who portrayed a young guy, did an exceptional job.
Phenomenal.
He got the mannerisms down, he got the voice down, he got the walk and the limp down. I mean, everything that he did, I was like, oh my god, you have just like channeled what a young Colin Farrell would be in this
Yeah.
character. It was just like pitch perfect. He did an incredible job. But secondly, yeah, to see all this was pretty intense. And I think when we think about the origin stories for both Sophia and Oz now, and to see and to understand, like, they are not what we expected, which is always, I think, great to subvert those expectations and to go to different places, because what we were told about Sophia initially didn't turn out to be completely true about her character, as we saw in her flashback episode, and somewhat of a similar thing, but more so from the perspective that Oz is an unreliable narrator, because he's just fed us bullshit this entire time about what might have happened to his brothers and how close or how devastated he was at their loss, because he's clearly fine once he understands and realizes the actual consequences of his actions. And he's sitting there watching the Top Hat movie with his mother, and he's looking out the window just to like make sure that they haven't made it out, and he's like somewhat smirking, like, oh, look at the work that I did, they won't be coming back. And now he can just have Francis all to himself. It's the most, I mean, it's really a really heinous thing when you think about it, when you think about being self-absorbed and self-righteous and self-serving and all of those respects, just for the, I guess, the approval and the acceptance of his mother, because he is that insecure. He is that empty inside, that he feels like he needs that approval, he needs that attention and time from her.
Wow.
And she reciprocates that now, knowing, you know, when she finds out, and we see later in the flashback that she's like, my boys are gone, and it's obviously devastating, but she implores Oz, like, you have to take care of me. So she has also placed this responsibility on him as a parent to a child, which felt so very weird. It felt so odd. Like, I know she's
Yes.
grieving and she's not thinking straight, but the amount of responsibility that she plays when they go to Monroe's at the end and we see them dancing, and she's like, yeah, you have to take care of me now. Like, this is your job, because there is no other man in the house. For a boy who's probably 11 or 12 at that point, it just felt so strange, but it sort of reiterates, you know, their interactions amongst one another. What was your takeaway from that? Just like seeing her make that request of him, and then and him also just obliging and like, yeah, I got you. Like, this is what we're gonna do. I got you from here on out. I'm taking care of you.
Yeah. That was, I agree. It was it was hella weird. I was like, this, your son is not your man. You know what I'm saying? Like, this
No.
is, what is this? He's not your man, he's not your father, he's not your what? How's this little 10-year-old boy supposed to take care of you? This is actually insane, especially after you were the one who was just taking care of him this whole time. And it's, it's legit, this weird cycle of like, y'all all need therapy first and foremost, because what is going on in this household for you to even say things to him like this? But I love how it does translate to everything we've been seeing up until this time. Like it does translate to everything where you're like, dang, this dude really loves his mom. Dang, everything he's doing does feel like he's doing it for the approval of his mom. His mom is literally also that self-absorbedness that he has himself, right? We're talking about like, yeah, you want the attention and like you killed your brothers just to get this from your mommy. And the mom's like, yeah, I want attention too, but just from you. Like, you got to take care of me now. It's like, dang, this is kind of ridiculous, and it's nothing but a endless cycle of what this, I guess, narcissism kind of looks like. But yeah, I too thought it was weird. And yeah, I think we've seen like examples of different examples of this in real culture. Like, people will be like, that son ain't really your man, and like, I don't know. I've just seen different examples of that on the internet or pop culture and things like that. But to see it here in like a different context in this weird Gotham nature is definitely something else, and something to continue to look at, especially going into the last episode. I think all of this will come full circle.
Big narcissism. I would say that they both need Dr. Rush, but he's lost his shit at this point. He's
Yeah,
not
I
right,
don't know what
so
he is.
he's not the right person to call. But yeah, this was all really interesting stuff. I liked it all. I just wish that we saw it all earlier. To be
Yeah,
honest, I just wish that
I
like
agree.
they sprinkled this stuff out, sprinkled these moments and these scenes throughout the season, just because like the Monroe's tie-in, the tunnels tie-in. Now that this is like
Mhm.
Oz's like headquarters in present day, it's the same place he murdered his brothers. All of that stuff works for me, but I just wish we saw it earlier so that it wasn't like so obvious and on the nose.
Mhm,
It
mhm.
almost felt like that they might have thought of this at the last moment, like, oh yeah, let's make this new layer, this very very dark place that's tied to his history, where it's like if we had saw it earlier in the season, and then all of a sudden we think back like, oh my god, they hinted at this like 4 episodes ago, and we're just now discovering
Mhm.
it. And perhaps that's the case. I might be missing something, but it just felt very convenient for me that they tied all of this stuff together in this episode, where I just felt like we could have deployed it a little bit earlier.
I agree.
But beyond that, moving on to Sophia, she makes a couple of key visits. She goes to talk to Frances after she kidnaps her, which was like the cliffhanger ending for last week. She doesn't take Victor, but she does take Frances, likely knowing how closely Frances is to Oz and how tight that relationship is. But Frances, she don't give a fuck. She's not scared of Sophia. She's probably been in many, many worse situations.
Mhm.
She threatens her and like, Oz he's gonna find you and kill you. And then before like anything can really go down, Frances suffers like another dementia episode in that moment, and I think sort of gives an idea to Sophia about like some of the challenges that she deals with, because she's like, do you know where you are right now? Do you understand what's happening here? She sees a more vulnerable side of Frances that she probably had no idea was even present and existed. And likely, if she hadn't seen this dementia episode, might have disposed of her more quickly. But we
Yeah.
know by the end of this episode, she still keeps Frances around. She doesn't kill her like I think a lot of us probably presume she would. But what did you make of that moment? Just that showdown between these two, like these obviously two very pivotal women that have
Yeah.
been a part of Oz's life. One being his mother, this other person being Sophia, now his opposition, and this dialogue and this interaction that they have.
Yeah, it was really cool, I think, to see these these woman kind of titans go head to head. I think in these moments they both I think contain, I think, ideas and words that have helped shape Oz in different ways, and to see how they go at each other is so interesting, because when they are yelling at each other and the diatribes being thrown, and like, it just, they're both right. That's the thing. Like, they're both saying things that are true about each other. Like, Sophia really is just doing a lot of the same things that her dad was doing. And I think that's something we've kind of been talking about. Like, oh, what are you going to do different? You can't just change your name, right? You gotta make sure things are different, and to see how things go down with Gia, I think in that way, it's like, dang, Sophia, you can't be. And again, I think for me, how Sophia has kind of been recontextualized as somewhat of a protagonist is like, yeah, Sophia, you can't be going down the same road, and you got to go tell Gia the truth or something. You know what I'm saying? You can't be part of the problem that you're trying to dispose of. But like you said, on the flip side of things, Frances, she does see that I guess that vulnerability in Frances, that that she does have dementia, and this this Alzheimer's, and she has that episode in that moment. She's like, where do you think you are right now? And I know Sophia, who has legit probably been, locked up around people who have had mental disorders and issues and things like that. And she, there's no way she doesn't have a soft spot for that. You know what I mean? Because she knows for sure how that goes down and what people will do to you once they know that you have a deficiency like that. Once they
Absolutely.
know that you'll forget things like that. And she goes, wait, I can't now. Now you're no longer as strong of an opposition than I thought you were. You're actually kind of in a vulnerable state, and I can't necessarily take advantage of you the way in which I want to, or I wanted to at first. I'm gonna have to switch this up a little bit. So yeah, I thought it was a very interesting way for that whole thing to go down.
Yeah, that idea that you pointed out about this cycle of violence, these reoccurring things that Sophia has now become. Yeah, we pointed this out. I mean, she has lived up to the moniker that she so often rejected. She has become
Mm-hmm.
the hangman in a lot of respects, not in the traditional sense. Obviously, these were all things that were mostly done to her. The betrayals that she suffered at the hands of her family, so on and so forth. But she also always has a choice and can always choose how to move, and she's operating in very, very violent places, out of a sense of revenge and redemption against Oz that's caused her to do some pretty harmful things, for other people in her own family. And that whole thing with Gia, when it goes down,
Mm-hmm.
to see this young girl sort of expose her and say, like, yeah, I kind of know that you're responsible for killing my parents, like, what's going on here. You can see her really bear that burden, and it appears, for a while, that, yeah, maybe she might come around, and maybe she might call this off and say, like, you know what, this has gone too far, this is just like too
Mm-hmm.
much. But then Rush, her therapist, her boo, whatever the fuck he is, I mean, he just leans completely into her worst impulses. He's like, no, fuck all of that, you got to see this through. Oz is your opposition. You do really want this revenge. You want to see him suffer. Make him suffer. And so we see that Sophia is not going to take her foot off of the gas,
Mm-hmm.
which is it's a shame, but it just goes to show, like, now the people that she's kind of surrounded herself with, there's more of that negative chatter that's kind of feeding those worst impulses, as opposed to somebody that's supposed to be positive. Like, the therapist is supposed to be, kind of the good guy, but just because of his
Right.
I guess the nature of what he's experienced with her, and that shit, that sex must be great. I don't know what it is. Like, he's out of his mind at this point now. He's just talking all sorts of shit that would go completely against his profession. So it's
Yeah.
just all really, really interesting to see that go down. On the other hand of it, Maroney, he's dealing with Oz at this point. He's able to
Mm.
go and get him. He's brutally assaulting him, but he takes him alive, because ultimately him and Sophia, they need to determine how they're going to take Oz out. And so they go down to the tunnels where Oz's operation is, and basically trying to take ownership of it. And Oz is, like, constantly provoking him. He starts to throw out some crazy stuff about his wife Nadia and how she died. He's like, yeah, I smelt her flesh burning. I smelt her hair burning. I didn't expect that. Like, he gets very, very graphic with that whole situation. And Maroney, he doesn't take that lightly. He tries to go after Oz, and I guess he has a heart attack. He fucking croaks and dies, like, right in Oz's arms, like, out of nowhere. And it's
Crazy.
like, oh my God, this is going terribly wrong. And Oz, certainly a man who is going to take advantage of any opportunity for leverage. He's so elated. He makes sure that Maroney sees him before he dies. Like, it was me. I beat you. I beat you.
Mm-hmm.
And then fucking double taps him, like, immediately after, with like 10 more bullets, as if he isn't already long gone,
Yeah.
just adding insult to injury. What'd you make of just that whole resolution of that arc, just knowing how desperate Maroney really wanted that revenge against Oz, but then ultimately he couldn't even take advantage, because his little old heart gave out right before the moment of
Dang.
truth, I guess.
Dang, Sal, you did all that to have a heart attack, bro. I was low key like kind of sad for Sal, because low key Sal's like one of the most honest people in this whole show. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's just a normal mob boss. Again, I talked about it I think last week, but his people got health care. They all get paid correctly. Like, he lost his wife and his son to this crazy dude, the penguin over here. Like, he just trying to live his life, but he's a very emotional person. You can see in that moment, Oz definitely gets to him, so he trying to whip his ass at all costs. And I think I think in that moment though too, while Sal is having the heart attack, Oz is kind of pissed too. Like he's both happy. He's both happy and upset. Like he's happy that like Sal is dying now. This is one person off of his plate. He doesn't have to worry about him. His operation is going to be okay. Sophia doesn't have the partner anymore. There's another part of him who's like, damn, I wanted to kill you, bro. Like, why are you having a heart attack in front of me? Like, what is this? This is ridiculous. Like, I wanted to kill you myself. And which is why, like you said, he double taps him in the end. He's like, well, at least I can put a couple bullets in him to make it look like it was me. I gotta do something here.
My
So
God.
it was kind of crazy to see him shoot somebody that was already dead, man. It was pretty wild.
It was wild indeed. I hysterically laughed at that point because I'm like,
I
dude, what
did.
the fuck is wrong with you? Like, you just pumped 7
He's
fucking
sick,
bullets in his
man.
chest. Like, that's really so sick of him to do that. But like you said, he just couldn't. He couldn't leave that situation not knowing that he had something, the smallest
Hmm.
ounce, to do with like, yeah, he might have died, but I made sure he was dead. Like, there's no coming back from what I did to him. Just like whatever he can hold on to throw in Sophia's face, really, he made sure he took advantage of. But then ultimately, we see that Sophia sends a van inside of Oz's base of operations. She calls him from another part of the city, misdirects him. Oz thinks that she might be there, but she's like, nope, actually I sent you a gift. Oz thinks it's his mother, reasonably so. He thinks that Francis's body might be in the car, but discovers that it's explosives. Sophia blows up the entire tunnel system, all of his base of operations. Oz manages to barely escape, and based on what the showrunners tell us at the inside of the episode, sort of aftermath, everybody else dies, and so Oz just like conveniently is the one who has that plot armor and is able to get out. Big explosion. The streets of Gotham go up in flames. It's massive. It's
Man.
it's a huge catastrophe. And the episode kind of leaves us off there. We do see sort of like another flashback again, like between Oz and Francis when they're younger. But that's really the end of the episode. And Oz gets kidnapped once again by one of Sophia's henchmen once he is able to
Hmm.
climb out of the rubble. But I'm just curious, like an entire city block blows up in Gotham in a major commercial area. Guys, are we not supposed to think that we're gonna see Batman show up when something like this goes down? Like,
Yeah.
I'm just kind of confused.
Yeah.
Like, I know what y'all said. I know y'all said
Hmm.
Robert
Hmm.
Pattinson isn't showing up, but I would imagine if
Yeah.
Batman is up in that fucking Bruce Wayne manor and he knows, like, yeah, I'm supposed to be on the lookout for Gotham. I'm the watchdog. I'm
Hmm.
taking care of crime. It might be the daytime, but I don't know. This feels like a situation that Batman will pop up for, but I don't know if he doesn't show up next week. Is that just like a complete betrayal of who the character is supposed to be? Is that just like too far that we have to suspend our disbelief that something so major would just be unattended by him, or are they justified in just allowing him to not be responsible, to not be on the ground for this? And I don't know. Maybe they address it later, or maybe he just I don't. Maybe he just missed it. Maybe he just couldn't take care of it at that time.
There's no way Batman missed this big ass explosion in the middle of the street, unless unless maybe there's something in the news report that tells us that deflects like, oh, this water tank exploded. He's like, oh, I'm supposed to do about a water tank. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know how they're gonna flip this and make it so Batman doesn't show up, but it just doesn't. There's no way he doesn't. Like you said, like there's clearly something afoot. There's some crime happening. A bomb in the middle of the. I don't know, man. He has to be somewhere, and there needs to be an explanation. Matt Reeves, where's Batman? Tell us, is he showing up in the next episode? And if not, we need an explanation because we just can't. This just can't happen like this, bro. And like you said, it'll be a disservice to the character a little bit. Like that's not who he is. Like Batman shows up and things like this happen. And he's like, all right, y'all, yeah, there's some detective work that needs to be done. There's some crime that needs to be fought clearly because there's now a hole in the ground.
So what happens when he doesn't show up? Because it's actually like very likely that he won't. It's probably like
It's
a
very
90.
likely.
It's like a 90% chance that, that he's not
Yeah,
going to be in the
for
show.
real.
So what do they say? Like
They
it,
got to explain it. I don't know. They got to explain it. Matt Reeves got to
man.
explain. Opening of the Batman 2 would be like during the Penguin. Like I have to know where he was. Like I need to know.
Imagine the entire inside the episode segment next week is just explaining why Bruce Wayne and Batman just didn't show up. They're just like, yeah, guys, we know what you're saying. We know that you have questions. Bruce Wayne, he traveled to Bloodhaven. He's just not in town.
Bloodhaven.
Like he's just somewhere else. And I'm just gonna be like, this
Yeah.
bullshit. That doesn't add up. Batman would absolutely, if that went down in a movie, Batman is popping up.
Easy.
It's a pretty significant thing. And I'm just gonna have questions if they don't say something about it. I'm just
Yeah.
gonna be like, so where the fuck were you, Robert? Like where were you doing this whole time?
Robert.
Because you don't let stuff like that pass. But yeah, I guess before we wrap up here, any other last thoughts, takeaways from this week's episodes, or just overall anticipation for the final episode next week? That's how they're promoting it over at Max. The final episode, they don't want to, I guess, bring any sort of
Give
sense of finality
away.
to it, give away what's going to come next or may not come next. I
Yeah.
don't know, but what do you ultimately
Mhm.
anticipate for what we might see with this? I guess this big showdown between Sophia and Oz.
Yeah, I'm really excited for what's to go down, and it's so interesting to see. Of course, Oz in such a weird spot being kidnapped, but Vic went to go get the army, and that's what it is, right? Sophia in Oz as a hostage in her army versus whatever army Vic went to go get with the other mob bosses. We'll see. We'll see how deep they come. The thing is about this for me in terms of believability is this all of this just happened, like he just got them together last episode. This is all a very new, fresh relationship with all these people. I'm curious, how hard are they really gonna come? Like, is the whole like they really gonna bring all their people, or is it like, oh, we'll see in a couple people? Like, oh yeah, we'll send one or two soldiers because again, it's a very new partnership. So I'm curious to see exactly what that looks like. 100%. I will say, I guess because we don't know if this is season 1 or season 2, by the end of this TV show, I always expected like the show would end with like him putting a monocle on or
Oh
something,
man, yeah.
just something like very comic booky to be like, okay, next is the Batman. You know what I'm saying? Like some weird natural progression towards the next thing that's to happen, or to say, okay, the Penguin is now the big boss in Gotham that's to be tampered with, and I'm just hoping we get there somehow. Like it could next episode could be an hour and a half. I don't know. I just need like an ending that's like, oh yeah, it's time to go. The Penguin is him. In Gotham. And I don't know if I feel like we'll get there. That's my only like thing. Like, I don't know if this point in the show makes me feel like, oh yeah, by the end of next episode, the Penguin's gonna be him. So we'll have to see. But I'm still excited to see how it goes down.
You want to see the top hat come out. You want to see
The
the
top
the
hat.
fucking timepiece hanging off of his waist come out, like the whole
I
thing.
need the boss. I need boss Penguin at the end of this. We'll be getting boss-ish. I need the boss. We'll be getting a
Yeah.
boss. I need the boss.
Yeah, this is one of the few times, like I've given Marvel a ton of shit about this with their shows. Like these shows only exist to give our heroes new costumes. This is one of the few times I want to see Penguin like in real
Yeah.
Penguin regalia, like fully fucking decked out, like looking as Penguin-ish as we can get in this realistic, grounded context. Like obviously he's not going to be looking like Danny DeVito,
Yeah, of course not.
but give us some cues and some signals. Like yeah, like you said, like this is boss era. Maybe it's a huge overcoat, some sort of like big
Yeah,
massive
something.
trench coat with some fur or
Mhm.
something real gaudy, something real extra and big, just like him living up to this moniker and him just being full of himself. Because like if he
Mhm.
eliminates everybody, which by the way I don't think Sophia's dying, I think she'll be around. But if he's able to like get rid of her and still sort of take
Mhm.
control and actually assume the moniker of being the big mob boss in Gotham, like I want to get to a place to where it's like, yeah, he looks that way, he feels that way. He's going to be a very formidable force in the Batman Part 2 whenever we do get that movie. So
Right.
we will ultimately have to see. But folks, those are all of our thoughts on the penultimate episode of the HBO original, The Penguin. If you've checked it out, definitely hit us up and let us know what you think.